Hey YouTube family, it's your girl Mrs. Rains here, and I'm coming at you today with the sermon notes. So I decided to go ahead and squeeze in all of the Koinonia week sermon notes as well as the sermon notes from this past Sunday so that you can get an idea of what we were talking about over the week. So the first day of Koinonia, which was December 28th, we talked about grace. And so the speaker started out with 2 Peter 3:18, growing in the grace and knowledge of Jesus Christ. Moved on through Titus 2:11, 1 and 2, which is grace is a teacher. And then John 1:14, Jesus is full of grace and truth. So basically what we're talking about here with grace is growing in it, learning it, allowing grace to teach you in other areas of your life. And then knowing that the grace that we give comes from the grace first given to us by Jesus. So moving on. We went through 2 Corinthians 10:5 and really talked about ways that you can grow in grace. And the first one is being sober-minded, meaning healthy self-control mind. The second point was having a relationship with others. So you can be righteous, upright, and with integrity. Because usually other people keep you accountable. A relationship with God is the point number 3, which is godliness and being worshipful. You change internally to change others externally. So these are the 3 points that were very important when growing in grace. On day 2, which was the 29th of December, we talked about love. And we went through Ephesians 3:16 through 19 and talked about how love should be steadfast, enduring, that we should be abandoning all the things that don't show love. So neglect, giving up, that kind of thing. We should also be thinking of one another, esteeming each other as more than ourselves. That's how you kind of grow in love. And there's so many different scriptures about love. There's different types of love when you look at the Greek. But we were just focusing on loving like God loves. So we talked about 1 John 3:1. Hebrews 10:4 and 5. I mean, there was a Mathhew 10:5 and 8, 5 through 8. You can look those up on your own. But basically, if you think about the cross, it was love that kept Jesus there. He wasn't forced to. He could have gone back to heaven at any time. He chose to stay there because he loved us so much that he was willing to give his life on the cross. So day 3 of Koinonia, we talked about mercy. That was December 30th. And we actually read through, we kind of skimmed through Jonah. And we talked about how God is merciful and compassionate. So if you know that we talked about grace, which is unmerited favor. We talked about mercy. Mercy is not giving you what you deserve. So we really deserve, condemnation. We deserve hell. We deserve all those things. But the Lord saw to have mercy on us and allowing us to have everlasting life and be in heaven through his son, Jesus Christ. So we talked about John 3:17. We often read John 3:16 and then we forget about John 3:17, which comes right behind it. So the points that I want you to know about mercy, the points that I wrote down, we can show mercy by being forgiving, showing forgiveness to those who we feel have wronged us in whatever way. Don't hold on to that. It's a new year. And besides that, forgiveness is not really for the other person's sake. It's for your own sake, so you don't grow in resentment towards people. Helping the less fortunate. So, giving your time, going to a homeless shelter, or helping a neighbor, helping a friend in need. It doesn't always have to be financial either. Giving. So oftentimes as Christians, we give for all types of reasons, but the minute it's time to give to God, what's God's, we try to cut corners. So we need to be giving, not cut corners. We need to really give. And then sharing the gospel. The Great Commission is still there. We still need to be sharing the gospel with those who don't know Jesus as Lord and Savior. And that runs a span. It could be within your circle of influence, or that means going on a mission trip. Praying for other people. Oftentimes we'll say, oh, I'll pray for you, but we really don't. We really need to be praying for other people. Praying that people come to know Christ. We need to be praying for people who are dealing with hardship in their life, enduring, all types of things. We need to be praying for, current events. You hear about things happening in the news. Don't just flip the channels past what's happening in other parts of the globe. Really be praying for people. The Lord hears our prayers. And so then we moved on Sunday. We actually got back into our text. If you recall, we had been talking about David. He had been running from Saul. He was coming to the point where he was going to be accepting the crown, and he's getting to that point. So we left off in 1 Samuel 30, and we read all the way through from verse 1 to 31. And this would have been New Year's Day, January 1st, that this message came across. And so what's important about Samuel 30 is that David has continued to go down this line of not trusting the Lord, leaning on his own understanding. And this is, I think, the turning point for him when he starts to realize he's living wrong. So Achish, who he had been living with, or living in his town, and had gone out on raiding parties and all this kind of stuff, he started living like, you know, the people in that town. And King Achish sends him back to his fortress, which was Ziklag. So if you remember, Ziklag is, it was really, basically David had gone to live around the enemy, okay? So the problem with that was, because he was living in an enemy territory, he was behaving like the enemy. The problem also was that David was looking at Ziklag as a place of a fortress, like it was like a place of safety to him. The reason why is not because of the Lord, but because Ziklag was a fortified city. It had all these, you know, it had fortified walls. It seemed very secure. So David had left his family there to go out with Achish to battle, but Achish sends him back. You've done great for me. You know, that's fine. Go back. So David gets back to Ziklag, and he finds out that Ziklag has been raided, okay? So the important point about this is about David's early life right now, is saying, even though God will take care of us, even while we're, you know, he saved us while we were still sinning, we are prone to wander. And like David, our hearts are desperately wicked and deceitful. David is still leaning on his own understanding rather than trusting God. So that's a note that I took. So here, David trusts these walls of Ziklag to protect his family. Who comes in? The Amalekites. They burned it. They raided it. They took David's 2 wives. God makes sure to tell us about that, because those 2 wives have been causing him nothing but trouble. But David has his 2 wives carried off, and now you're getting a glimpse of what happened back in 1 Samuel 15, 2 and 3. So if you go back to 1 Samuel 15, 2 and 3, Saul was told to wipe out all the Amalekites. But Saul refused to obey. He actually took their king prisoner and brought him back to Israel. And he ended up having that king, he was going to spare him. But he shouldn't have done that, because that's not what God said. God told him to wipe out the Amalekites. And because he didn't, you're seeing them kind of keep popping up here. So here, finally, David inquires of the Lord, and the Lord answers him. David asks, hey, should I go after this raiding party? Should I go find my wives? All this and that. And finally, God answers and says, yes, you should go on a raid, or you should go find that raiding party. And how it happens is David meets up with a servant. The servant is a servant of the Amalekites. He was left behind because he was sick, and then for 3 days, he was kind of laying there, you know, sick. And so David finds him, and David feeds him, and he starts to regain his strength. And David is saying, you know, who are you? Where'd you come from? And this guy says, hey, I'm a servant of the Amalekites, and I can show you where they are. So David said, you know, yeah, please show me which way they went. And he said, you know, take me with you, but don't turn me over to my master. This is the servant talking. And so David, you know, agrees to those terms, and he finds the Amalekites, and he's able to bring back his wives and recover everything. So here's another interesting caveat to this story. Well, when David goes off to look for this raiding party of the Amalekites, some of his men stay back because they're exhausted. Because you have to know, they've been running, they've been going on and on, they're tired. So the men that stay back stay with all of their equipment and whatnot, and then the others head out. Well, the ones that headed out to battle, some rabble-rousers within that group come back with David and say, you know, the guys that stay behind shouldn't get anything. But David has learned his lesson, and he tells them right then and there, those who stay behind still get their fair share of the spoils, and they still get, you know, whatever plunder we have taken. And I think that that's important because it's a turning point in David's thinking, and he's learning, and God is showing him that, you know, you have to be fair and just, because God is fair and just. So David is learning now how to be a leader and how to do it the right way, not to be coerced into anything by other people, not to be pushed to do something he knows is wrong. He is actually thinking, you know, the way the Lord would have him think. And so this becomes a trend now in Israel after this time. And the Bible even tells from this point forward, that's how the mentality is, that those who stay behind are as equal and important as those who go out and fight. And that's important even in God's church, because, you know, I wouldn't be able to go and teach in children's ministry if my husband wasn't, you know, doing things that had to do with the kids and making sure they're situated in the sanctuary. Or my husband would not be able to go out and do the AV ministry if it wasn't for, you know, maybe me doing other things for him. Or, you know, my husband goes out to work and I'm able to take care of the home. And me taking care of the home is as important as him going out to work. So it's important in the family, it's important in the church, and it's important in life to know that those who go out are as important as those who stay in and take care of the household. This is also important if you have like babysitters. You know, if the babysitter's taking care of your kids so you can go out and do ministry, that's important, and they're just as important as your ministry effort going out and sharing the gospel. So that is the sermon notes. It was a lot of information, jam-packed. I encourage you to go back and read some of those scriptures I mentioned. I kind of skimmed through them very quickly. I didn't want the video to be too long. And that's about it. So I hope you're having a wonderful new year. Happy New Year. I hope it's a time of re-energizing, and I hope you're getting yourself situated for the year. And yeah, that's about it. So put God to all you do, and I'll see you on the next one.